Good afternoon and welcome, everyone.
Today's all-digital lifestyle is changing how consumers make buying decisions. Nowhere is this more apparent than in advertising and how consumers interact with brands. Change is being driven by the symbiotic evolution of technology and consumer expectations. Technology has made product information ubiquitous, social media encourages consumers to share, compare, and rate experiences, and mobile devices add a wherever dimension to the digital environment. Consumers want to interact anywhere at any time. They want to do truly unique things as disparate kinds of information are deployed more effectively in ways that create value for them. And they expect all data stored about them to be targeted precisely to their needs and used to personalize what they experience. And they expect all interactions to be relevant and easy. Consider, we use our devices to inform and educate and make purchases in store. We're always on and always connected. We know that mobile usage is on the rise, with more than 1 billion smartphones shipped in 2013, a 42% increase from the year before. Nearly 80% of the U.S. Internet users used mobile coupons upon checkout in store this year. Almost 70% of tablet owners use their devices to shop from the comfort of their couches in the last 30 days. And according to Nielsen, nearly half of smartphone and tablet users use their devices as second screens while watching TV. This is today's digital lifestyle, and the marketer is battling for precious consumer attention in a highly competitive environment. All this fragmentation means the expected customer journey built into traditional marketing systems and processes no longer exists. Traditional marketing systems and processes fail to capture all the touch points and key buying factors resulting from the explosion of product choices in digital channels and the emergence of an increasingly well-informed consumer. When marketers understand these changes and direct their spending and messaging to the moments of maximum influence, they stand a much greater chance of reaching consumers in the right place at the right time with the right message. But the sheer volume of data, channels, and choices create the need for new systems and tools to help them understand how consumer behavior changes depending on devices or location or time or context, and enable them to engage in the most effective way. Today, marketing is embracing its data-driven future. It all starts with data, but it's not big data. It's actionable data. It's data-driven marketing. Programmatic enables you to market smarter by working with huge volumes of data, turning it into insight and then action. And although today's rhetoric is that of the low-hanging fruit of efficiency and cost savings, we know that consumer experiences with brands are set to become even more intense and defining. That matters profoundly because such experiences drive the majority of the decisions customers make. As the opportunities for interactions multiply, companies will want to use techniques such as programmatic to shape consumer experiences. And this, of course, means being where your customers are. Marketing cannot be siloed anymore. Programmatic enables you to be where they are, when they are, and deliver a personally relevant message. This is true today and tomorrow with the continued growth of mobile connectivity, better designed online spaces with HTML5, the Internet of Things, and advances in the handling of consumer data. In the past few years, the marketing discipline has been flooded with a deluge of marketing-focused technologies, many of which have advanced our knowledge of our customers. Given the predictable increase in computing power and the abundance of available data for driving insight, it is inevitable that more marketing technologies will emerge. Marketers have more application and platform decisions to make than ever. Bid management, campaign management, conversion optimization, attribution management, marketing automation, social media monitoring, behavioral targeting, etc. Every time a new platform or application arrives on the field, the decision space actually grows exponentially because, again, it's not just decisions about individual components, but decisions about their interactions with each other. Marketers need to become system integrators, building upon platforms that can maximize the opportunity to deliver the right interaction and the right message at the right price to maximize the opportunity to win the battle for consumer attention in the moment of maximum influence. And to be clear, it's not just about media selection and procurement. The scarcity of consumer attention and our customers' demand for relevance renders the best technology useless if the message isn't relevant or doesn't resonate with the audience. Today, we need to seize upon the available technology and insight, plus the real-time qualities of programmatic, to develop and deliver creative that will resonate with your audience. At DataXu, we know that compelling storytelling combined with creative decisioning optimization yields better campaign performance. I'm very pleased that DataXu continues to invest in enabling consumer engagement as evidenced by our acquisition of Jasper Labs today. To date, there's been a natural focus on the technologies that are necessary for true customer-centric marketing, but we also need to be discussing the impact on the entire marketing ecosystem. Are new processes required? What about the people and skills? That's why DataXu commissioned Forrester to develop this paper and the subject of this webinar. We know from our own conversations that some big questions are being asked. Brands and agencies are looking to understand how these seismic shifts in marketing, rooted in data, consumer insight, and analytics, can increase the value that marketing brings to their business. The conversation has quickly moved from what programmatic is to what it really means to be successful. So with that, I'll hand over to Jim Nail of Forrester, who will answer these questions and more. Thank you.
Great, Ed. Thank you very much for that introduction. You definitely teed up a lot of the topics that we found in this project and in the research we did for this. So let me just thank you and your colleagues at DataXu for partnering with Forrester on this. I think that it brings a lot to the industry as it goes through this transformation. I hope that our listeners will find that kind of value in it. So as you can see here, we titled this Marketing Embraces Its Data-Driven Future, and they learn that new skills and partners are essential to success. And while that echoes a lot of what Ed said, I think it goes a little bit beyond that, because I think we've all heard and talked about data and marketing becoming more quantitative for many years. And what we wanted to do with this research was roll up our sleeves, dive in, and find out, well, exactly how are marketers taking on this challenge. In the early days, as we were forming the topic, we talked about it in terms of myths and realities. So that's what we will dive into today to find out exactly what's going on as marketers make this change. So let's go ahead to the next slide here, and sort of the big summary, kind of the big conclusion out of this is that marketers have embarked on this transformation. It's no longer just talk. It's no longer just these kind of ethereal concepts about right time, right message, right medium, right person, right. They really are starting the work that it will take to really be able to deliver that. And there's certainly a big technology piece to it. There's no doubt about it. But as you'll see, there's a lot of new knowledge and skills and expertise and support required to actually then take those technologies and make them deliver the kind of business value that marketers are conceiving that they have as they make this transformation. So next slide, please. And let me go over some of the key findings, and we'll dig into each of these, obviously, in more detail. But let me just set up the big ones. First, as Ed said, this idea of relevance. Again, not just some cool concept that's floating out there. What we heard over and over again in the interviews is that people experience this relevance already at many sites. The poster children are Amazon and Netflix. But because they experience it on those other sites, they come to expect it whenever they go to any marketer's site at all. And in order to deliver that kind of relevance at that level of detail, at the individual level, marketers are shifting, and their sort of core skill set is shifting away from the typical creative, intuitive, empathic sense of the market, and shifting toward a much more quantitative, data-driven way of understanding what those individuals are looking for. But this is a new skill for marketers. And it's not an easy thing to find a marketer who's got deep experience in this. So often, those external partners, sometimes they're agencies, sometimes they're technology partners, but they can be a valuable source to help fill the gap in these skills as marketers make this transition. And then our next key finding, as Ed intimated as well, you start at the level of efficiency. You can get more bang for your marketing budget buck. That's great. But marketers very quickly learn that when they really dig into the data and they really understand how to analyze it, they come up with new ideas, new approaches, new insights that can make marketing a much more strategic contributor beyond in the past. In many of the organizations we talked to, they were simply this kind of communications function, but definitely bringing more value by bringing a higher level of insight. So those are the big studies, or the big conclusions out of the study. What we did here, we talked to 13 companies in North America and Europe for about an hour, and dug in on a bunch of different topics, really trying to get a handle on, where are they in the world of capturing and using data from their customers, particularly how they're then applying all that data in programmatic media buying, but also that broader sense of, as they get their hands around this data, does it change the role of marketing in some way, and the contribution that marketing makes to their organization. And so what we'll do, I'll cover this in these key topics. Dig in a little bit more about marketers gearing up for this transformation. What exactly are they doing? How are they approaching this change? And obviously a change like this, they're going to run into some barriers of various sorts, organizational, technical, skills, etc. So let's take a look at those barriers as well and see what are some of the actions marketers are taking so that those barriers don't get in their way of moving forward. Then we very specifically asked these marketers after we heard what they were doing today, so what are you doing next? What's on your roadmap for the next 18 to 24 months? And you'll see that there are some very specific things that marketers said are critical as they continue to leverage where they've started from, and they were all very, very clear that they feel they're very much at the early stages and still have a lot of work to do. So we'll see what kind of work they've got planned. And then we'll dig in a little bit more on this idea of marketing becoming more than just a communications function, becoming more than kind of a cost center, but really an organization that really helps drive the business. And then I'll wrap up with some of the key recommendations that hopefully you can all take back and start thinking about in your organizations. So let's take a look more at this transformation there. Great. So this transformation really has begun. And I've been with Forrester a number of years, and I've heard people talk about this transformation, but what really struck me was in this, the very specific kind of actions and very specific kinds of activities that marketers told me about that they are undertaking to show they're really digging in and working on this. Ed alluded to this as well. Efficiency really just the first step, and I think that's in a lot of cases perhaps the easiest business case to make when you want to invest in some of these technologies and data, to be able to go to the CFO and say, hey, look, I can save us X amount, or I can stretch our marketing budget further by doing this. So an important case to make, an important benefit of becoming more data-driven, but as I said before, marketers really very quickly understand that there is more value in this data, and that once they've got that together, they can find additional ways to create value. Relevance is now table stakes. Again, heard over and over again that even companies in their own category, many companies felt other competitors were doing a better job with that. And so it's no longer this nice to have, or no longer this dream that someday will happen in the future. It's happening all around them right now. And as a result of that, some marketers feel pushed into the transformation. Some of them are kind of pulled and lured into it. We heard a number of cases where they were very forthright about how their competitors were stealing share. Their competitors were doing a better job than they were, and that woke them up and they had to begin to take action. But they also realized that they were sitting on a lot of data already, and they weren't really using it to their fullest advantage, and they started to think about what would be possible. And then as they started to think about that, they started to create these really interesting new ideas of how to win, serve, and retain their customers. And I can't go through all the detail in our short time together, but when you get the copy of the full presentation, you'll see more what I mean. But this was a quote, I think, that really captured this idea very well from a business-to-business marketer. It's like, hey, I can now calculate the true ROI and cost per lead, but I've also identified new targets beyond the CEO that we need to market to. And as we were talking about that, he was talking about how particularly his sales team, obviously loves getting a meeting with the CEO of a company so they can get right to the top, get that product in front of the CEO and hopefully drive a quicker decision. But again, as the marketers looked and gathered more data and looked more at the data, they began to identify other influencers and other groups that were equally and perhaps in some cases more important to get in front of. So the data really helped them there. This was a really fascinating concept to me, that communications is becoming kind of a service. It's not just a sales pitch. And using data, and again, this comes out of relevance, when it's really relevant to the consumer, it doesn't feel like marketing anymore. It feels like just helpful, useful information that, yeah, this is great. This is exactly what I need to help me with this decision or to help me use this product better, things like that. And when you start talking to consumers not as someone selling something to them, but talk to them about what they're really trying to accomplish in their life, it becomes much more about the whole customer relationship. And one of the common themes we heard was that, while the current structures around particular channels or departments, are helpful to really, maximize efficiency in a particular dimension, as this data comes together from all those different sources, some of the way they work together will need to change so that they can meet the customer's needs more holistically. And all of this requires that creative, intuitive approach that's been kind of marketing's legacy just is no longer actionable as you try to break down segments in smaller and smaller segments. You get hundreds of segments. Often we heard that, or even all the way down to that one-on-one. That creative, intuitive approach breaks down, and analytics becomes absolutely essential. One of my favorite quotes from this entertainment company, I think, again, captured a lot of this idea, and he was actually the one who used that term, communications as a service. But he qualified that and described that more fully by saying we're trying to humanize communications by using more intelligence, data, and computers. Interesting contrast there. And when we can send every customer message that's so personalized he thinks it cannot be done by a computer, we will have gotten to the point we want. I think what a great vision. Really, really found that inspiring personally. So, sounds great. How do we do this? And what are those barriers and roadblocks and bumps along the way? First of all, there all this technology that is required to do it. One of the themes we heard was technology is not really the problem. The technology is out there. In one of the interviewers said in as many words, if you can dream it, you can do it. So technology is not the barrier, except that it is still a little bit disconnected, and it's still a little bit evolving, actually a lot evolving. So, for example, we heard things like legacy data is insufficient. If you've got a great database full of past transactions and demographic information about your customer, that's great. That's a start. But relevance really requires more than that, requires more behavioral and attitudinal information from your web analytics, from social media, things like that. But bringing that data together from these different sources and its different formats and all these kinds of things, just getting that all connected can be quite a challenge. And even when you get it all together and you try to go back and implement that, we heard a number of cases where either the web content management system or the website architecture or other kinds of technologies just were not up to implementing that kind of customization. So then there's other technologies that need to be worked on. The second one is this idea of, what are the skills needed to do this? If it's not the traditional marketing, creative, intuitive type, what is it that you're looking for? Where do you find these analytical people? And ideally getting someone who's a little bit analytical and a little bit intuitive. That's kind of the dream person out there. A couple of very practical things we heard. One agency we talked to said very explicitly, we go out and we recruit search engine marketers. They're used to that kind of bidding and that kind of quick turnaround on different keywords they're buying, things like that. So they have some of that different mindset and some of those different habits in place that you can build on for a fully programmatic approach. But secondly then is running all of their marketing staff through the ad ops, ad technology side of the business. They're absolutely explicit in saying, unless you really understand the technology and what it's capable of, you cannot design a campaign today that is really executable and that's going to work. So no matter what your ultimate aim is and your ultimate career goal is, spend time in the technology, really get that hands-on experience with it. And then a ton of work educating other colleagues and other people on staff so that they understand where you're going, understand what you're trying to do, and can see the results that you get in the early stage and then support you going forward. A not untypical example was this quote from a global information services provider. Said, when I started here, we didn't have the technology base we needed. And I spent 6 to 9 months cleaning up data, bringing in a DMP, setting up attribution before we could even activate programmatic media. It's, of course, you always want to just jump in, get going. Let's start delivering these results right away. But there is that kind of basic groundwork that needs to be done first. But then also planning and execution processes have to change in order to really take advantage of these opportunities. There's one really interesting discussion we had about, while the promise of all these technologies is great, you do have to put some real thought in first about your desired audience, look at what these tools can actually deliver, and sometimes it's not exactly what you want. So you just have to do some fine-tuning and make sure that you're as in sync as you can be with what is actually available and what the tools can do so that you're really getting good success out of it. A lot of test and learn. Marketers are used to spending a lot of time planning, and you build these really sophisticated plans, and then you go execute them. But more and more it's becoming, okay, we've got sort of we've got a good idea what we want to do, but we're not going to try to get down to that level of detail that we've done in the past. We're going to go out there, we're going to test and learn and move forward from there. And because things are much more fluid, it takes a much more agile workflow. And very specifically, one of our interviewees talked about adopting some of the practices of the agile software movement and using that in how he manages and executes marketing campaigns. But all of this brings different functions together in a very different way. As I talked before about the whole customer experience, it's not just about delivering ads to customers anymore. It's about making sure that when they respond to that ad and they come to the site or they come to your store, that they have the experience you promised them. And so there's much more need for that kind of collaboration. The good news is we heard several of our interviews talk about how once they had this data together and they could share it with these different organizations that they worked with, it began to flow more freely, and people were it became a center point that they could collaborate around and agree on, this is what we're trying to do, this is our customer, and now let's go back into our functions and execute according to that. But it also brought external partners' roles and changed them somewhat as well. Again, often making them closer and almost making them extensions of your internal staff. We heard from a couple of folks. And then another role that marketing has to play is this idea of bridging the business and the technical. Those are still two relatively different worlds, and someone's got to play translator. And because marketing is the group that has the hands on the dials and the levers, they spend time doing that. A lot of people didn't expect to spend time on it or spend as much time as they have on it, but it came out as a very, very important part of this transformation. I really liked this consumer goods marketer who I thought brought this idea to life. That he said, if I don't have a strong relationship with, say, the sports brand team, I won't be aware of their data and won't be able to help them take advantage of opportunities. The advantage of a good data program is it's less reliant on relationships, and I can build a more collaborative planning process with them. So he was talking about being able to access some of that data, come up with his own kind of hypotheses, theories, ideas, insights, and then go to that brand team and say, hey, I'm noticing some of this. What do you think? Is that a good thing? Is that something new? Should we execute a campaign around that? And just created some very, very good conversations. So as you can see, a lot of work going on right now. A lot of things people are working on, attacking some of those barriers. So what's next? What is on the roadmap for the next couple of years to achieve even higher performance? One is this idea of getting more hands-on with the data and algorithms. The folks that we were working with, that we talked to who were working with a DMP or a DSP, were pretty hands-off at this point. And they would set their broad goals and their audience descriptions, but really in a lot of cases let their technology provider do the day-to-day detail in managing that. Some of the more advanced ones are ready to take that next step, and they talked about getting under the hood and how can we, if we understand those algorithms better and we know our data better than anybody else is ever going to know our data, if we can hook up that knowledge of our data with a better understanding of the algorithms, we think we can get even better performance from them. So they've got the basics under their belt, ready to get a little bit more hands-on here and take the wheel a little bit more in some of this. Then improving attribution. This was one I had not expected to hear, but it makes perfect sense. Getting a better handle on what is the influence of each touch point and what are the sort of synergies between those different touch points that drive performance. And really, really cracking that code, very difficult problem. A couple of our interviewees said they're pretty close, they think, to figuring it out. But then that will help them make smarter decisions and smarter allocations as well. And no surprise here, mobile channels, that's a big, big thing, as Ed alluded to. It's one of those blessings and curses. A blessing because you get all sorts of new data that is very, very close to the customer and very, very close to the kinds of actions that they take. But again, it's a whole new set of data sources, different kinds of formats, different types of data, and all of that has to be brought in and, again, figure out how to connect that with all the other data you have and then use that effectively. So just keep them getting better and better. That's the plan for a lot of people. And then the result of that, as I've alluded to here, is marketing gaining respect and clout and really being viewed more as a critical business driver and not a cost center. So moving beyond efficiency and getting to effectiveness so that it's not just about okay, I've got my budget, and can I squeeze out a few more percent in terms of leads or in terms of sales, what have you, but can I get beyond simply using this data to lower my CPM, but to find maybe some higher cost opportunities, but ones that are also higher return and so therefore merit that kind of investment. And that's where attribution comes in. Because obviously things like last click attribution may seem like a particular channel, say display or even email or something. Maybe that doesn't seem to be performing, but it's making a contribution to other actions down the line. And so knowing how those work is really important to make sure you're not cutting off something that makes a big contribution and actually hurting your effectiveness down the line. One of my favorite conversations was, again, the B2B marketer I alluded to is a fairly small company, and he talked about having a much bigger impact on a small budget. And when you can target to those individuals online programmatically and get right to people who are right in the heart of your target audience, you can look a whole lot bigger than you actually are. I think he said something about how a chimp can look like an 800-pound gorilla online when you do that. Very colorful. But then marketing, again, becomes more than just a communication tool and starts to engage the whole customer. So that as this data comes from the website and from store POS systems and from email or social kinds of touches with the consumer, you get this very rich view. And at the same time, being able to take that rich view and inform each next touch provides new kinds of experiences. And particularly then around products. This data really helps reveal what products are selling well, what are not. So now you're enabling not just communications decisions, but you're enabling merchandising decisions. And actually one of our interviewees talked about how that's got to start feeding back into manufacturing, where they had not been paying attention to the data and could have sold a lot more of a particular product if they had been aware of the data and been able to ramp up manufacturing, but they lost opportunity. And then, of course, connecting customer service and operations. Customer loyalty is so critical now because it is so hard to get consumer attention when they've bought your product, when they've experienced your brand. That's fantastic, and you've got to make sure that that pays off going forward. So going beyond tracking customer satisfaction scores to one example was an entertainment company who asked people on their satisfaction survey when they came to their theater for an entertainment event, how comfortable is the seat? And they were actually then running a report and sending back to that theater manager the numbers of the seats that people rated as uncomfortable. I thought that was absolutely fascinating way to use that data beyond marketing, but really into that experience. And I love this quote, too, of our global information services provider. If you set yourself up to really work with all this data, you run your business programmatically, not just your media buys. I thought that was a fascinating concept, and certainly putting marketing at the heart of that helps marketing evolve into a critical function. Let's go ahead for the next bullet point there. We heard a couple of people talk about Salesforce effectiveness. How can you use that data as a marketer to go beyond, doing collateral and helping with sales presentations, but to help that salesperson understand his territory better, help him know more about those leads, who he should spend time with, who he should sort of put to the side. And proving incremental value is critical. We heard a lot of pushback that when marketing started down this path, we had several people tell us that people thought that this really wasn't going to be an improvement. It was simply going to be stealing sales that would have happened in some channel and moving them into this other channel. So having that data, though, helps you combat that, helps you have the proof that what you're doing really is incremental. So that justifies that investment. And my friend here, the B2B marketer, we've set a vision that says marketing is a line function with the same importance as sales and product, so that if marketing goes down, the company would come to a screeching halt. Don't think there's a lot of marketing departments today that could say they were that important to their company. Yes, the evolution. So let me just wrap up a couple of quick points that I've been going over here, and then we're going to have some good time for questions. So hopefully this has raised some questions in your minds. We're happy to answer those in our remaining time together. So the key points here, and I think, Carolyn, why don't you go ahead and just build out this whole slide. So marketers must adapt to the customer opportunity. It's happening around them. Their competitors are doing it. Other companies are becoming very good at it, and therefore setting consumer expectations that if you don't respond, it becomes a threat to your business. And it's not going to be a one-time event. It's going to continue to evolve for a number of years as mobile continues to evolve, as the technologies around attribution get better, as you bring in new data sources for your attribution. This will be an ongoing role. But that ability to improve marketing's role and make it a key business driver is really an opportunity to embrace, to have marketing be that key driver in the business. So to do that, let me give you a few recommendations. So it's skills, new ways of working, educating the organization, demonstrating how well this works compared to the proven, comfortable processes you have are very key. One thing is looking in some fairly non-traditional areas for marketing talent. Traditionally, marketers come out of journalism, liberal arts, marketing curricula, of course, but that's not enough. These days, we heard people looking in the math department, the computer sciences world, the financial trading disciplines, to bring in people who can help infuse marketing with some of this new way of thinking. And while we've talked a lot about the analytical and the data skills that are needed, good creative will still be critical, and I couldn't agree more with what Ed said about that. We're still dealing with human beings, and at the end of the day, you've got to have that understanding and empathy for that, so that message is resonating and will be motivating. Some people can do both of those. It's very hard to find those people. So organizations will need to blend those skills and not just have both skills, but have a culture that really encourages those folks to come together and work together on executing and planning campaigns. Absolutely essential that people understand the technology. I thought that was a great idea that the agency had set of rotating everybody through the ad tech, ad ops world as part of their on-the-job training. But we heard a number of marketers also do things like have loaner devices, so loaner iPads or smartphones or things that their employees could take home, play with for a while, start to get comfortable with them if they didn't own them already. So those kinds of ways of encouraging your employees to really get their hands on this technology so that so they understand it fully. And then as you really embark on this and start to turn your organization toward this, proving, evangelizing, and demonstrating. So proving things work, really taking a very rigorous approach to building tests, good test and control structures, measure those results rigorously, have other stakeholders outside of marketing help design in those tests so that when the results came out, they had a hand in building it, so they kind of have to believe it. And also, marketing often took a back seat. That was an interesting little tip we heard. Instead of marketing trumpeting the results themselves, step back, let the brand or product staff who was involved carry that message. Has a little more third-party credibility there. And that's part of evangelizing the success, so that people really see this is not just some wacky new idea or some crazy new technology fad, but see the results for themselves and then create this idea of a learning agenda, a term we heard from several people. Sometimes working with their agencies or their tech partners, but really going out and aggressively engaging people across the firm and teaching them what are we doing here, what is new about this, how are we going about this, and giving them sort of the new ways of thinking and the new skills and opening their minds to new things that are possible, so that they can let go of some of those old things that they've been doing, but then they have the comfort to wrap their hands around some of the new things. And sometimes even all of that doesn't work. Probably my favorite conversation was with the B2B marketer I mentioned a couple of times, where he demonstrated this. And the way he did it is he took the top 300 executive and sales executives in the company, and he targeted them programmatically so that wherever they went on the web, they saw ads for their company. And a lot of them came to him and said, what are we doing advertising on site X? I think he actually mentioned Match.com. What are we doing advertising on Match.com? We're a B2B company. This makes no sense. And that gave him the perfect opening to then explain, no, we're not buying any ads on Match.com. We're targeting you, and here's how this works. And he said that really helped open people's heads and turn their heads and open their minds and got them behind his efforts. So sometimes being a little creative and a little aggressive and gutsy about it can be important. And I think then that's it. So I hope you found that helpful. And again, love to take some questions for you at this point in time.
Great. Okay, so thank you, Jim and Ed. I'd like to now open to the question and answer session. So to ask a question, please use the question box located in the GoToWebinar console. We already had some questions arise, so our first question, I believe, is for Ed. It says, why do we say actionable data instead of big data?
Sure. So I think in a data-rich environment, we can be guilty of allowing the volume of data to cause paralysis by analysis, if you will. So I think sort of we use that term to say, don't let the existence of data create inertia. And sort of like rules of the road I was thinking of are sort of start with the data that helps you understand your customer better, push forward with the data that allows you to better understand the effectiveness of your advertising invested, sort of the attribution topic that Jim touched upon, and then learn from that derivative data created by your program. And again, we had some great examples of this, sort of the manufacturing data example or the seat comfort example that Jim mentioned. I mean, it sort of summed up best by saying, run your business programmatically. So let the data cycle, the actionable data cycle, run your business.
Great. So our next question also is for Ed. We know big companies use programmatic, but can smaller companies, for example, what if you had a budget of $1,000 per month?
So we have a guiding principle here at DataXu where we say we're trying to make programmatic effective, efficient, and easy. And a lot of our design work is around making programmatic or enabling programmatic for customers of all sizes. So the first answer is that yes, and we believe that programmatic can maximize your return on advertising spend. However, I think you need to realize that the budget limitations may limit your choices of channels. But as Jim said, you can use it to your advantage in a small budget environment using targeting to amplify your budget.
Yep. And Ed, if I may, I'll jump in on that because in the paper we do talk, one of our interviewees was an entertainment marketer who said they've got a very limited budget actually for promoting any specific concert in any specific city on any specific date. But they were able to use programmatic buying and again prove that those ticket sales that they could drive were incremental. So they used it very successfully on very, very small budgets.
Great. And we actually have a question for you, Jim, now. Can you explain what you mean by test and learn?
Yeah, absolutely. Marketers are used to, again, this idea of we're going to plan, and this is our media schedule, and this is our creative, and you get that all done, and then you execute on it, and it's the same creative, and it's that media plan. You just run it as planned, and then at the end you measure it and hope it worked. Instead of that, with the ability to get close to real-time results data, you don't have to kind of set it and forget it. So you might, we heard cases people might run for a day or two with their plan, see where they were getting the most results and what sites or what particular placements were performing, and then start moving budget around. That entertainment promoter that I talked about doing tons of different kinds of tests, down to what kind of clothing the artists wear in the photos of them in these ads, to see how that impacted how people responded. And again, because digital gives you that flexibility, you can try these different variations, let them run for a couple of days, see the results, and then react from there. All the time, of course, the learning part of it is having a kind of standard ad that you're testing against, so that you can see whether that new variation is performing better or not.
Great. So just moving right along, we have another question for Ed, which is, can you please explain the difference between, quote, data-driven and programmatic?
Sure. So I'd posit on this question sort of the data-driven in the context of our conversation today is a subsegment of programmatic, if you will. So as we're talking about programmatic today, and as we think of it here at DataXu, it goes beyond just simply data-driven, and that's not a negative. I think data-driven can be used in traditional marketing, and we think of it in terms of things like segmentation analysis. But it goes beyond. Today, programmatic goes to how you activate the data, both in terms of analysis, like creative decisioning, and distribution of that data into paid channels and media. I think you need to think of programmatic as this. It's the opportunity to acquire data, add insight to that data, and then take action on it.
Great. And another question, Jim, I'm going to throw this one your way. Where do you see the separation in roles between advertisers and agencies in this space?
Wow, that's one that we heard a lot of different opinions about. It's one that's very much in flux. And I think what the key point of controversy or point of decision at this right now is, given the fact that this data and these programmatic tools allow you to respond so quickly, how do you set up a different relationship with your agency so that, again, current relationships are set up where the agency goes off for weeks and comes up with a recommendation and comes back to you, and you review it for a few weeks, and you take it up, through your senior executives, and they change it, and it goes back to there isn't time to do that anymore. So I think what people are struggling with right now is, how do they develop a different relationship with their agency, and how do they set some boundaries so their agency has more flexibility to act on that data, but without giving full control over the agency, still maintaining some checks and balances on that. Versus there are those who are advocating, I don't need an agency anymore. If I've got these tools and I've got people on staff or a good solid technology partner, maybe I don't even need an agency at all, at least not for execution. Their strategic advice and insight still probably valuable, but maybe not as much of a role for them in execution. So watch for that. The next couple of years, I think, will be very telling to see how the agencies respond to that challenge being put in front of them to change how they interact with their clients.
Great. So I think we are just about out of time. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us.